Okay, so this is how we use ps2gui to take your ISO ps2s and turn them into encrypted iso.bin right here .encs, which are also playable on your PS3 through ps2 classics placeholder and using them through webman mod to also mount them. So first you would take this ISO right here and you would go to the encrypt here and you would click it and then open. It'll give you this. It's essentially just telling you what the config file is, that it's decrypted or not, all of these sectors, whatnot, and then you would hit encrypt, and then you would also, do you want to patch this? So you would also do yes. And then you would allow it to go through here. This will take a couple minutes, so I'm just going to cancel it because I already have the iso.bin.enc, so we don't have to worry about that. Now you can take your actually when after you encrypt it, it will try and save it in the exact file that you had. So I recommend putting a file in, whether it's your desktop or a specific folder titled with whatever your game name is. You cannot change this iso.bin.enc for the package making process. So after you have this, you also have to rename this file because it will come up as iso.bin.enc.bin.enc. It's this whole long file name. So you'll just change it to iso.bin.enc. We'll go to your package. You can pick whatever. I just made another game recently off of one of the discs that I ripped, so you can just pick whatever. Since it has, let's just use this. No big deal, because I don't have a picture for this Tony Hawk game, unfortunately. However, also when you do open this package after you have already encrypted your ISO into iso.bin.enc, it should already have your game name, but also it should have the title name, which right here, I don't know if it's visible, it says SLUS 21616. So that is actually also the config file that you would also want to use for this game. So when you make a package, it'll ask you where you're looking for your encrypted file. So mine was in PS2, Tony Hawk. You can double click it. And then make sure you delete this because it will randomly pick a file that's named iso.bin.enc, or it won't pick a file at all and you'll have an issue. So you go to your game, the one that you just encrypted, hit open, and then it'll wait a second as it's fetching that, and then ask you for your config file. So if you don't always have your config file up, you can also go here in your, it's aldostools.org, and if you look up, you can see all of your config files right here. So it's right here. You can also click this and download it if you need. However, I don't need it because it already has this file. If you either click it like I just did there, or if you press the left arrow when it's highlighted, it'll automatically populate the config file that you need. So you just hit open here, and then it will start your package making process. This will take a while, so it might just freeze, it might say that it's loading, but you also want to look at this right here. If you look right here, you'll see that it's also taking that iso.bin.enc off of here for now. It'll put it back into this file. But as you can see, it says ps2 package, and then package conf. It's essentially lumping that config file and the iso.bin.enc into one file. So I will be right back once it's done here. So now that it has populated right here, this is what you want to look for. It's gonna open up what your package version is, which is just essentially what it's trying to create your package as. It'll probably always say 1.0, but as it's if you can see right here, it's giving you your title, the where it's moving the iso.bin.enc out of, creating the package file, doing all the prim.sfo checks, and then it'll come down and give you your license, which will essentially allow you to play this as a package game as if you downloaded it off of the PSN store. It's giving you also your title ID, which is your config file, if it's bootable, all the system versions and whatnot, and then it will continue on here, generating the package name as this. It'll change the name. As you can see, it's also over here on your file directory where you pulled your .iso bin.enc, and yeah, it's essentially creating it into that package. Okay, now while we're waiting for that package to create, as you can see, it's still creating down here as the little green file is continuing. I highly recommend going to the PS Dev Wiki and checking the PS2 Classics emulator compatibility list. Some games are already created as a PS3 package, which is essentially what you're doing on the PSN store. This was released for PS3 at the PlayStation Store and is 100% playable. Then you've got your playable, which works perfectly. You've got some with some minor issues, frame rate, etc. Sometimes this can be fixed with the proper config files. You've got your major issues, which completely critical broken functions, all sorts of stuff like that. And then completely unplayable, crashes, freezes, breaks after certain parts of the game. Always check before you create your iso.bin.encs or your package files, because this will save you a huge headache. So for instance, we can come down here and we can go to T right here. If you click T, you can go all the way down. So we're making one right now for Tony Hawk, if I can find it. Or Tony Hawk. Alright, sorry about that. My cat decided to jump up and knock everything down off of my desk over here. So we've got right here Tony Hawk's Proving Ground, which is what I'm using. It is playable on both PAL, which is the left corner. You've got your in the middle, which is North America, NT, SC, US. And then the Japanese is not available. So unfortunately, this game is not available. You can see that the config fixes major graphical glitches and freezing. If you're making it as a package, this shouldn't be an issue, as the process that I showed you should be adding the config file into your package. If you're not using it as a package, I can explain that later, but let's go here since it just completed. ps2classicsgui just said it completed, so we will click OK. After it says, it's just giving you a notice that you need to do some other stuff if it's a demo, blah, blah, blah. It is also renaming to blah, 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 ps2 classics, the config file package that you just used, and the output where it actually got put. It put it in Tony Hawk's Proving Ground, my PS2 games folder, Tony Hawk folder within that, and the name of that. So let's go back to that folder. Alrighty, so we are back in that folder. As you can see, we now have the ISO in one, the package file in another, and it returned the iso.bin.enc. It also shows you the size of it. If you hover over it, it is 2.13 gigabytes. So now, if you're going to use this package file, you can take this right here, or if you're not going to use the package file, if you want to use it through the Classics emulator, rename this, and we'll just say Tony Hawk. Oh my lord, I can't can't use my thing, so Hawks proving ground, and then we'll just save that since I don't need to make another package file for it. Do this after you make the package file, as it will not allow you to say Tony Hawk's Proving Ground and then create a package out of it. Now, you can either use FTP if you have a USB, or not USB, you have an Ethernet cord, you can plug that directly from your computer into your PS3 and download it that way. However, since this file is less than 4 gigs, which is what the FAT32 USB is the limited on, we can just open up this USB here, can open up our Tony Hawk file right here, and since I already have these things packaged in here, I have my PS2 ISOs, so we can take this iso.bin.enc and put it into the PS2. I also have some other stuff adding to that right now. You can also take this package file right here, and we'll minimize that. We'll put this right in here. If my computer will load. Give me 1 sec. Okay, there we go. So now, as you can see, it's copying first my PS2 ISO, the ISO bin.enc file, and then we also have the package file copying in as well onto just the regular part of the USB or the flash drive. I highly recommend just putting the iso.bin.enc if you're going to use this through the emulator ps2 classics placeholder, or if for hen, or if you have custom firmware, you have another way to do this, or if you have a backwards compatible PS3, you won't need to do this at all, as you can just pop the game into your PS3 and play it that way. I always make package files just in case the iso.bin.enc does not work. For some games, that process will not work, and you have to use a package and put it onto your PS3 that way. However, some games also do not run as a package, so you have to run them as a iso.bin.enc off of the first by mounting it with webman mod, which I will probably show you guys in a little bit here as I get that stuff loaded onto my PS3 after we do all this here. But also just having that extra copy in case you do lose your system, hard drive replacement, anything like that. You can also do some of what this process with the ps2classicsgui through Apollo. So if you have the Apollo save tool already on your PS3, you can go into Apollo, take your disk, and rip it off of the disk in your PS3, and then from there you can turn it into an iso.bin.enc. I have more problems with Apollo than I do with ps2 GUI, so I just use GUI because it's simple, easy, and most of the games that I own and have ripped onto my computer or are in the process of ripping are all under 4 gigabytes, so I can just easily put them onto my FAT32 formatted USB flash drive right now and use it that way. Because yeah, there's no point if FTP is actually going to be considerably slower unless you have an Ethernet cable, which I do not. I have to do it over internet. That's a whole process too. I probably won't go through it in this video, but we'll see where we're at right now after I get all my stuff transferred over. Alrighty, so if some of you noticed, I also have another game going on to my flash drive right now, which is the Dragon Quest VIII Journey of the Cursed King. As you can see, however, it has minor issues. So this is just a test that I'm using right now. Occasional stuttering, PAL version, which I do not have. I have the NTSCUS version. It will sometimes freeze when escaping from battle, and now also the NTSCUC version, the US version, will sometimes soft lock. Configure does not fix these issues, so this will be a test to see if this game actually works. But as you can see, there are tons of games that are already created as classic, so if you make it into a package file or a iso.bin.enc, it will work. If they're classics, ps2 classics, they will 100% work. If they're playable, they should 100% work as either or. You just do have to be careful about certain games. Some of the games in the early PS2 era, let's see if I can find it. I actually had a huge issue with, where is it? Actually it's up here. It is a game called Dark Angel Vampire Apocalypse. Right here. It is playable. However, when I tried to make this game as a package, it did not work. So if we go over to this one right here, I have two Tony Hawk files open. If we go to our PS2 game, it's right here. No, actually, sorry, wrong one. It is Dark Angel. This game was actually a CD disc. It is instead of a DVD disc from some of the later PS2 games. It is a very small file anyways. It is only 600 megabytes. The package file didn't work for me, however. It seems that sometimes ps2 GUI has issues with these bin.q file games, which is what a lot of PS1 games. I'll also probably be doing a video on how to use what is called POP FE PS3 to do PS1 games with multiple discs, either single or multiple. This Q file essentially tells the bin file how to work, and for some reason ps2 GUI, it can create a package and encrypt this into an iso.bin.enc, but it cannot physically run these bin.q file games as a package. I still have this package here. I'm saving it just in case anything happens. But if you do have a bin.q file game, you're gonna have to run it as an iso bin.enc through a PlayStation 2 emulator on your PS3. Otherwise, it will not work properly. You'll get a black screen, it'll freeze, and then you'll have to reset your thing, your whole PS3, because it won't work that way. Otherwise, just make a package file. An ISO will have no issues. Bin.q games, just make it into an ISO bin.enc file by encrypting it through ps2 GUI here, and then take that, rename it to the name of your game. So we'll just say Dark Angel, because I already have it on my PS3. Since I don't need to make a package anymore out of this, I can just take this and then slide it over into my FAT32 formatted flash drive, and then just take that and go through Multiman, which I will show you for when I get to my PS3 here. I also forgot to mention, depending on what kind of firmware you are running on your PS3, whether that's custom firmware or hybrid firmware with hen, this will change how you actually want to grab your config file for these games. Most of these ones, if you have a non-hen, if you have a custom firmware, you can just use custom net, GX, and the soft ones. However, that will just, you can just click custom firmware, it'll automatically, and if you just type in, like, for instance, a game that I did the other night off of my copy, and oops. So as you can see, we have a bunch of Dragon Quest. Dragon Quest V was made on the PS2 as a Japanese version. I patched my Japanese version into an English version. However, I have hen, so I cannot use these custom files that you see. Hold on, let me move my camera. As you can see, I have custom, custom, custom. I can't use these ones really. So now if I just do that and I click hen, it'll change. Now it shows in my ENC. This is the file that I want to do, slpm655.55, which is what I did for my Dragon Quest 5 disc with my English translation. Part of the issue is also why you want to look at these this compatibility wiki is if you go down and you see Dragon Quest 5, we have an issue right here, which is why you need to do the config. Config fixes characters getting stuck in a cutscene near the end of the game. I created this as an iso.bin.enc, and it works perfectly fine. I'll show you how to add config files also once I get to my PS3 after I download all of this stuff and get it all set up. But this thing will be the biggest help to you besides this actual config database, which ps2GUI also uses. See, as you can see right here, it says by ps3dev.net and Aldo's tools. So a lot of them are already in this ps2GUI folder. When you download ps2GUI, it already has these config files, most of them already added because it uses a lot of this stuff with PS2 config database here. You also have a link, I do believe, to ps2GUI. If you click this right here, it should pop up. Yes, it'll show you where to get ps2GUI, the 2.2.3 version in your PSX place. You can also find where to get the launcher, which is the PS2 Classics placeholder. If it wants to load for me, hold on. Yes, in Brewology. So this is the PS2 ISO launcher. You can get this one, or for me, I used a different one. I used the PS2 Classics placeholder. I'm not sure if this one will work with hen. I know for a fact the one that I used does work with hen. So if you already have one of these launchers, you should have one of these launchers for your iso.bin.enc files. So I actually found it. So I actually have the PS2 Classic Launcher version 1.0 that comes from Brewology. I would also recommend, if you do grab this PS2 Classics Launcher, you also grab the PS2 config file database for it, as it will sometimes have the files that you already need. So if you can see right here, it's these two files right here, the PS2 Classics Launcher and the PS2 config files. This will mean that you won't have to put this onto your FAT32, the config file that you possibly need, onto your FAT32 drive and then transfer it via Multiman or Irisman or any of your other file viewer homebrew applications. You could just take this and immediately go into Multiman or Irisman and just drag and drop those files into your PS2 ISO folder on the PS3. I do apologize for my computer being pretty bad. Unfortunately, because of how old it is and how junky my computer is, I cannot do screen record, so I'm actually using it with my phone, which is why there's such poor quality. But as you can see, I do have the PS2 ISO for my previous game that I will be testing, Dragon Quest 8, in my package file. And I also have it in my PS2 right here, 7.8, as the iso.bin.enc. I highly recommend doing this first, the PS2 ISO method, because if you spend all that time going into your PS3 and then going into the package, downloading it as a package, having it install, and then the game just crashes immediately, all of that issue or all of that work for that issue to pop up and then slowly just kind of waste all of your time. The PS2 ISOs will transfer through Multiman from this FAT32 drive considerably quicker than if you were to have downloaded this package onto your system. It takes maybe a second or two. I think the longest I've had transferring a PS2 ISO from the FAT32 to the hard drive on my PS3 was something like 2 or 3 minutes for an incredibly large PS2 game, which was, I think, well over 4 megabytes. It was literally the max amount that could possibly go onto one of those old DVD discs. So it was like 4 point something gigabytes. Alrighty, so we are finally done. I now have both of those games, the one that I showed you, Tony Hawk's Proving Ground, in the ps2 GUI tutorial, and the other game that I will be testing at some point. It is also right here in my PS2 ISO folder on my flash drive. Tony Hawk's Proving Ground. So now we're on the PS3 here, and with your FAT32 USB drive, you want to plugged in, you would go to File Manager. We'll close this, and then we'll just open one. We'll go to hard drive first. Hard drive. Open another PS3 root here. And this time you will go into your USB. If you have a super slim PS3 like I do, your left USB will be dev USB 001. We can open this. You can see all of the items on here that I do have. We'll open our PS2 ISO. We'll go into our games. Actually, no, sorry, not games folder for that one. This will be PS2 ISOs on your hard drive. And then we can just click this, click circle, copy it. This is your hard drive. We will paste this folder. It just asks if you want to, this is for your iso.bin.enc to make sure that the game actually works and that you didn't get a bad dump. It says 5 minutes, but it should not take 5 minutes, as it says it goes down here. So now, if you need... So, as I was saying, if you do need to add a config file in here, as you see some of the games I have right here do need these config files, you will instead open up another root, this is why it's good to have, as I explained earlier, this is why, sorry, I lost my train of thought there. This is why you download the config files that come with the PS2 launcher that I showed you on my PC through the USB. And you'll come down to what's called right here, ps2 config. So as you can see, it'll give you a directory of config files. So normally it comes into the ENC file for your hen config files. Oops, I pressed the wrong button. Sorry about that. We will go back into File Manager. Everything should be okay. So you would come down, and if you needed a lot of games, I've noticed in the NTSCUC use the SLUS config files. So yes, we see SLUS, and then also some of them will use like an SLMP file. You don't always see them in this one, but if we go back, you can sometimes find them in the alts and customs and other areas here. So you can see you can find some SLES files in here for certain games and all sorts of stuff like that. So this is how you would then copy that over here. Oh, here, I will show you here in HD. So the config file required for the Tony Hawk's Proving Ground here is 2slus216.16. So you do the same thing that you used to put this ISO in here. You would paste it. Yes. And then you would find it here, slus. However, what you're going to do here is you're going to rename this file. You can delete all this. You are going to rename it exactly the same name as the exactly, it is case sensitive as the ISO that you're using. Alright. Oops. And this will Tony Hawk Proving Grounds, or Proving Ground, sorry. You can rename this anything on your PC, but once it comes here, it needs to match exactly space for space, word for letter, if anything is capitalized, if there is a dash, if there is anything like that. See, it will match exactly, then you just hit. Oh, you will also, at the end, have to add .config. It needs to be exactly the file plus .config here. So now if we look, oops, let's go back into, on this one, my PS2 ISOs, and you can see now we have two right here, Tony Hawk's Proving Ground.iso.bin.enc and Tony Hawk's Proving Ground.iso.bin.enc.config. So this will make sure that it is running properly. If you needed that config file on just like the dev wiki showed you that some of these games will have graphical errors, this is how you do this. So whenever you run this game from the PS2 launcher, it will now allow you to automatically load the config file as if you were doing a package. So now we can just go here, go to this, and quit. This will bring us back to the XMB here. And this is where Webman mod comes into play. You will go to Webman Games and see I have a bunch of ISOs already in there. You're going to have to go to the setup, and you want to refresh Webman Games and XMB. Once you do this, it will scan for all of the content within your PS2 ISOs and relog you in, just so that it knows, okay, hey, this is what I am looking for, and then it will come back to Webman Games, and then you'll see now that you have multiple, where is my, that's not it, we have Tony Hawk's Proving Ground right here. So we will click this, and it'll automatically bring you up to your launcher, and you click this, and now your game starts up. It will disconnect your controller because all the PS2s do this, all the PS2 games, and see, look, now it loads up. This is how you use it through the bin.incs, and we can just skip through. There will be a memory card process that you'll have to do. You can skip through the story. Sure, why not? And there you go. Yeah, sometimes the games don't look so great if you are... So here we go. As you can see, it loaded on up here. This will work for most of your games. Sometimes they won't have this issues. This is why you would run it into a package file. Now, I just reset to the XMB, and if you are running hen, you will constantly need to re-enable hen to do any of these things, or enable hen to get into this classics launcher here, placeholder. Otherwise, you won't be able to get into it whatsoever. However, you do want to now, if you want to install this as a package file, you should always have it. If you're doing FTP, this will be different. However, it'll always be install package files. And then you would go to standard. This will look for anything on your storage device, whether this is on your PS3 hard drive or these games are already locked on via your, or logged into your flash drive. So then you would just look for the one we're looking for, which is the Tony Hawk here. You'll start it, and then it will take a minute, however long, to download. We will be back once it's done downloading. Okay, our install is complete now. So now it should show up in your PlayStation 2 games if you do have them sorted this way. So we can go all the way down to, should have been in here. Fun ones. Oh, yeah, I forgot. I put it this one. And then we can just click this and open it. And again, you can see PlayStation 2. This is how the package file works. It'll turn off your controller again. Just make sure you turn it back on. And there we go. It loads on up. There is one benefit to using ISO.bin.encs for certain things. And if you are using a multi trilogy iteration game, something like that, that uses multiple games to span a series. So I just quit back to the XMB real quick. But there are some games that, for instance, span, like I said, multiple titles. You will see stuff like some of the Suikoden series and the Dot Hack games and other things where you need save data from a previous title. Some of my PS1 games, I do believe, some of these Suikoden games, for instance, one, or Arc the Lad series here, will require that you load data from another previous iteration. Sometimes this will not work if you need to download that same data. So if you have a 1, 2, 3 game, so in the first one you beat it and you transfer your save data to number 2, these package files don't always allow you to transfer that because the memory cards for some of these package files, the way that you make them with ps2 GUI, it won't let you travel that save over. However, for certain games like this Tony Hawk game, or again like SSX, Battlefront, all these other games that I have, it doesn't really matter if they're running an ISO.bin.enc or a package. Most of those games that I did have don't work properly sometimes as ISO.bin.enc files. They have to be made as packages. But once you do all that, if you do want to enable hen again, if you have hen or if you have custom firmware, you probably don't need to re-enable it. But then you can just immediately re-enable that, or go through your thing and come back into your package file and just play whatever games you want. Or if you wanted to, you would go through the custom placeholder right here, which is the ps2 emulator that I use. You can get other ones, as I said. You can just click through here after you re-enable your hen, and just make sure every time that you re-enable your hen and go into webman game setup, that will be beneath the package manager, and then you will be able to mount the disk that way every time. You just have to, whenever you want to play a certain game, unless it's already mounted, if you already played it previously and you just want to pop it back in after you reload up your PS3, you can easily do that. I will also be making a video to how you do this for PlayStation 1 games with pop.fe.ps3, so I will show you guys that next time.